Welcome everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us. Our webinar today is Connecting with Parents about Early Warning Systems, Tips and Resources for School Districts. My name is Sarah Rand. I am a Partner Engagement and Communications Consultant at REL Midwest at the American Institute for Research. Our agenda for today, we have a group of fantastic presenters. We're going to be talking about what it's like, or some of our recommendations for communicating with parents, specific communication strategies for early warning systems. We'll share a very exciting new parent resource brochure that will be yours to use. And we will talk about school-level communication from an educator perspective at the end. A few housekeeping items as we get started. We want this webinar to be interactive. So please ask questions of the experts using the Q&A. We have a chat box on the right side of your screen. We will compile the questions and the comments that you ask, so please submit them throughout the presentation. In addition, please feel free to chat with fellow participants throughout the webinar. This webinar platform you might not have used before. It's called On24. And to access the group chat, there is a blue word bubble icon at the bottom of your screen, and you actually have to click on this icon to have the box pop up. You can chat in that box with other participants, but please note that you do have to click on that comment box to bring that up. It's blue. So we've got the Q&A box. You can ask questions. The blue group chat box allows you to communicate with fellow participants. So please talk with us as we do the webinar. This webinar is put on by Regional Education Laboratory Midwest. We are a part of a network of 10 regional educational laboratories. We're funded by the U.S. Department of Education's Institute for Education Sciences. Each REL serves a designated region of the country. We focus on the Midwest. And we focus on the priority of helping states and districts use data and analysis to address important policy and practice issues. Our goal, ultimately, is to improve student outcomes. This webinar is part of a special learning series that all of the 10 RELs across the U.S. are participating in about early warning systems. There's a web page that you can visit to see all the related events and resources. That website is actually listed in a resource box, also found at the bottom of your screen. This is a green box that you have to click on to expand, and you'll see the link to this learning series web page there. Also in the resource box, which is green, there are PDFs of all the brochures that we'll talk about later today, as well as an agenda for this webinar. So definitely pull up that green resource box and check out all the good resources and links there. Our goals for today: we want to discuss the challenges, successes, and importance of communicating with parents about early warning systems. And we want to share some exciting strategies and tools that you can use to communicate effectively with parents. I'm excited to introduce our fantastic panelists today. First, we will have Lacey Wood. She is a Principal TA, Technical Assistance Consultant at American Institute for Research. She has more than 16 years of experience in family and community engagement and more than 18 years of experience with support systems for school improvement. She leads the Family Engagement State Leaders Network, which is a group of SEA, family engagement staff across the U.S. Next, we will have Monty Williams. She's a researcher at the American Institute for Research with experience in college and career readiness, with a particular emphasis on post-secondary pathways and transitions. For the past 3 years, Dr. Williams has provided technical assistance to 10 schools that are using early warning intervention and monitoring systems to help students stay on track for high school graduation. Next, we welcome Sonika Dillon, a researcher for REL Midwest. She has extensive experience supporting research on early warning systems, including helping to develop an intensive early warning system professional development series. Finally, we welcome Laurie Krasinski. She is the data coordinator at Scott High School in Toledo, Ohio. Her role is to facilitate the use of both student and adult level data in school decision making. Her overarching goal is to raise student achievement. Welcome all of our presenters. And we want to know who you are. So I'm going to put up a poll here. If you can select one of the buttons. If it's other, you can introduce yourself in the group chat box. Again, you can access the group chat box by pulling up, it's at the bottom of your screen, it's a blue box that you have to click. So take a moment to take our poll. All right. If you haven't already, please take a second to share what your role is. And let's take a look. We have a bunch of other people here. We've got some district administrators, state education agency staff, policy professionals. So if you haven't yet introduced yourself, if you are in that other category, please do so in the chat box. Looks like we have, another data coordinator from Toledo Public Schools. We have someone from the New Hampshire Parent Information Center. Welcome. We have Leanne from a PTA Education Commissioner. Fantastic. Great. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to our first presenter, Lacey Wood. And as we go through the presentations, please note that we're going to add questions in the group chat box for you to respond to as the presentation goes on. So if you're watching the presentation, look in the group chat box for the questions and feel free to have a side chat there. Lacey, I'm passing it on to you.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone for joining us today. So for my portion of the presentation, I'm going to provide some overview information about communicating with parents. So why is communicating important? What works? What are the conditions where parents are most likely to be involved? And what are the characteristics of effective communication? And then my colleagues will follow and provide more detail around those strategies following my portion of the presentation. So as Sarah mentioned, they're going to be putting questions in the chat box, so you'll want to make sure to look over there. And they've got one now. So what can we do to make parents feel that they can be more involved in their students' education, even if they were a dropout at themselves or if they didn't grow up in the U.S. or attend a U.S. school? So we wanted you to guys see that while I am presenting. So let's start off. One of the most important components of family engagement is building relationships. And this really needs to be our first step because we know that programs that focused on building trusting and respectful relationships are the ones that are going to be most effective in creating and sustaining meaningful partnerships. And those are partnerships between staff, families, students, and community members ideally. This is a broad partnership work where everybody has a shared responsibility for a child's education. In our work, we see that the sense of welcome families feel really has a direct effect on their involvement in their children's education. So as we're thinking about how to communicate with parents, we need to make sure we are also focused on building that welcome environment and building relationships. So how do we build relationships and the trust that's so important in those relationships? Some strategies for you to think about are honoring any type of involvement or contribution that families can make, making sure you establish that welcoming environment, always recognizing, respecting, and addressing any cultural or class differences, and making sure that you really embrace that philosophy of partnership and promote that this is a shared responsibility. So what do we know about effective communication with parents? What we see when we look at the research is that effective communication is communication that will both empower and engage parents. It'll help build those relationships and create those partnerships. And we need to make sure that these partnerships are intentional and they're focused on supporting student achievement, student learning, student development, and student growth. And we all know that as students enter secondary schools, they become more independent, and connecting and communicating with families can be even more challenging for educators. But we also know that during this time in the student's life that family engagement is very important, and just as important as it was in the early years. So what enables parents to be involved? Researchers have explored why parents get involved and what those conditions are where parents are most likely to be involved. And those are when parents understand that they should be involved, and that is that they have a belief that this is part of their role as a parent and they understand how they can fulfill that role. Where parents feel capable of making a contribution, and that's when they have confidence in their abilities, skills, and knowledge. And really when parents feel invited, and that's invited by the school or even invited by their children. So we find that requests and invitations from staff and students are those that are going to be most effective. So now we're going to cover characteristics of effective communication with families. And these characteristics really include interactions that are two-way. So not just one-way communication, not just newsletters out to the families, but we need to also have mechanisms where families can easily communicate back with educators. We need to make sure that those communications are specific and targeted. The districts should really think about different communication vehicles for different types of families. And assessing the needs of those families early on to know how to best communicate with them is really important. So is this through social media, through different technology, through personal invitations, personal messages, texting, email, phone calls? There's so many ways that we can communicate with parents, and we need to make sure that we're providing the right mechanisms for their needs, and that when we're using technology to make sure that they have access to that technology and that they're trained. We need to also really make sure that those communications are both strength-based and solution-focused. And that means that those communications should always be clear and constructive and focused on positive messages. Other characteristics of effective communication include interactions that are ongoing and always responsive to those families' needs. Like I said, assessing their needs early on is always important. They need to be accessible to everyone and in the languages of the families served. They need to be responsive to the cultural, ethnic, racial, language, and other characteristics of those families. And we need to make sure we're using a variety of ways to communicate with families. We need to listen and learn about their culture, their interests, what are the pressing issues in their families, and really design our strategies around that context. So things to think about when we're doing that and how to do that is making sure we're addressing, like I said before, differences in language, that we understand their perceptions of their child's academic ability, that we understand their home culture regarding education, and that we're addressing any barriers to engagement that districts and schools can help alleviate. And finally, as we're thinking about sharing information with parents, we need to remember that family engagement is a shared responsibility. So we need to make sure we share clear expectations for each other's roles, and those are the roles of both the families and the educators. We need to ensure communication is focused on student learning and healthy development, and we need to be focused on strengthening both the quantity and quality of our interactions with families. So districts should be thinking about how to consistently initiate communication and share knowledge that is both timely and linked to learning goals. And that's the key here. Clear expectations, timely communications, and making sure that those communications are linked to learning goals. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Monty Williams. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I am Monty Williams, as indicated. This section of the presentation will focus on those particular communication strategies for early warning systems. And as I present, please type in the chat box your response to the following question, which will be posted shortly. How do you communicate with parents, and what has been effective? I really love sharing strategies amongst our colleagues during webinars because it's very useful to see what other friends are doing in the field and how we can learn from one another during this professional development training. So please jot down your answers to that question. And so in thinking about different types of communication strategies, research suggests the following types of communication. One-way communication, and subsequently I will talk about two-way communication. But the first I want to address is the one-way. And these are the particular examples that you can use. Newsletters and brochures, school-to-home notebooks, student progress reports, emails, and you can also make use of your school's website as well. And so in thinking of this communication strategy, you want to, as my colleague indicated, really think about the audience in which you're trying to reach. Make sure that your message is clear. It is okay if you go through a few rounds of edits to make sure your message is being displayed concise and in a clear manner for the following one-way communication strategies. The second form of communication, and it was actually the preferable communication strategy researched in literature, are the two-way communication strategies, specifically because this allows you to have one-on-one with parents about your student progress within their school setting. So when thinking about two-way communication strategies, consider parent-teacher conferences, consider calls home to speak with parents, but also think about how you relay that message and call home specifically. Research has suggested that it may be helpful to start with a positive message first before you then go talking about ways to help students progress for high school graduation and beyond. So really also think about the way you utilize that call home to speak with parents. And also be mindful, if you can, of the parent schedule as well, because a lot of our parents do happen to work, so we want to make sure that you are reaching them in a timely fashion. The other opportunity for two-way communication is through open forums. You know, make your parents feel wanted and that they have a voice at the table. When parents do share their voice at the table, they feel they have a lot more onus to their child's educational progression within their school. And then you're also able to relay information to the parent in a very honest manner and one that's very open, in the open space with the parent that you serve. Now, what's interesting about communication this day and age is the use of technology. So you have to consider in thinking about the technology in which you use communication, you want to be sure that you train teachers on how to use new technology. But not only teachers, just overall train your staff. And we also have to consider ensuring that parents have access to the technology that is currently being used. There's so many different types of technology that is available to school districts on a daily basis, and of course there's always others that are competing to use the best technology out there that's available. So just make sure that parents have access to the system and that also parents are provided the opportunity to have training in the new technology that is being implemented. Now, we always have to remember that communication is a skill. I cannot repeat that enough. Communication is a skill, which means you have to practice it. Consider investing in training that will prepare your staff to use effective modes of communication. That includes verbal communication and nonverbal communication, written communication, and visual communication as well. So really consider providing that additional training for your staff to be better prepared on how to utilize communication in all different facets and forms. This will allow your staff to be equipped and well-knowledge on how to present information to parents that best suits their needs. And so in thinking about the communication strategies, just considering on, you also want to know your audience. As a result of knowing your audience, you will be able to develop those effective communication strategies and delivery. You will be able to tie it back into your overarching goal because you will be able to develop a communication strategy that essentially ties back to what your school is implementing with regards to college and career readiness, after-school programming, or just in general for this in particular, early warning systems. Make sure that you create useful and accessible information that is catered to your audience's needs. As a result of knowing your audience, you will also be able to build those relationships with the parents and the students that you serve. This will show the parents that you are culturally responsive to their context, their needs, and bringing them to the table. So with that being said, next my colleague will share with you one example of how early warning systems is communicated with parents using one-way communication.
Thanks, Monty. My name is Sonica Dillon, and I'm going to be walking you through a parent brochure that we have developed. So in working with educators in the Midwest, we noticed that they were looking for a tool to help communicate about the importance of graduating to parents. And you'll see that what I'm going to do is present this resource that we created in response to that request. In addition, you'll see that Sarah will be posting a question asking you to share strategies about how you might share this brochure. Like my colleagues have stated, I think there's a great learning opportunity there. So definitely add your ideas and look at the responses. In addition to being able to download the brochure from the webinar platform, under the resources section, you'll also be able to find these brochures that I'm going to talk about on the Learning Series website. So let's get started. So on the screen, you'll see a screen capture of the title page of the brochure. The brochure is meant to be used by secondary schools, so middle schools and high schools, and is designed to answer the following questions for parents. When do students begin to show signs of not graduating? Why is graduating from high school important? What are common signs of being off track to graduate? And how can I help get my student back on track to graduate? In addition to the English version you see here, we have also developed a Spanish version and 2 customizable versions. I'll talk about the customizable versions a little later on. For now, I'm going to walk you through the English version. So the inner fold, so the first panel that parents will see explains that dropping out is a process that can start long before a student enters high school and can affect a student's educational and career opportunities. In the inner panel, so the left side, we explain why graduating from high school is important. In particular, we focus on the long-term economic and health benefits of staying in school and graduating. The middle panel identifies the common signs of being off track to graduate. We've actively chosen not to explain what early warning systems are because these are often tailored to specific school or district needs. And it also might be less important for parents to understand how those systems work at first and rather focus on bringing awareness to parents because we want them to be attuned to the indicators or the flags and encourage them to assess whether their students are exhibiting these signs. If a parent shows interest in understanding how early warning systems are operationalized in your schools or districts, you may consider providing additional detail at that time. On the right side of the inner panel, we've included information on how parents can help their students get back on track to graduate. As I mentioned before, we have an English and Spanish version and 2 customizable versions. Both the English and the Spanish version will be modifiable. You'll see that I just pointed out the section that will be modifiable. You can use the strategies that we've listed here, or you can list ones that are specific to your school or district. As well as having the brochure on the Learning Series website, we will also have some strategies for customizing the brochure. I've listed 3 here. I wouldn't consider them comprehensive, but a good starting point to kind of help get our juices flowing, so to speak, and creating a brochure that's specific to your needs. So the three strategies that I've listed here include supplementing the brochure with ways parents can partner with your school or district, supplementing with school or district-specific students or supports that you might have, or including school or district criteria. So these are the early warning system indicators and cut points for identifying students who are at risk of dropping out. In addition to providing some ideas on strategies for customizing the brochure, we'll also include some ideas for how you might share the brochure. Again, these, the ones that I offer you here are not comprehensive, but a good starting point. So some ideas to consider include mailing the brochure at the beginning of the school year or with report cards, posting the brochure to your school website, making the brochure available in school main offices, or making the brochure available during teacher or parent-teacher conferences. With that, I will pass the presentation on to Laurie Krasinski.
Thanks, Sonika. Hi, everyone, and good afternoon. My name is Laurie Krasinski, and I am a teacher at Scott High School. We're in Toledo, Ohio. We're an inner-city school with a high level of poverty, and my role at the school as a teacher, rather than teaching classes, is to be a data coordinator, which really means that I'm working with teachers, students, administrators, really any staff in the building to look at both student level and building level data and use it to drive decision making. We have had EWS, an EWS team here at Scott. We're going on our 6th year. Initially, we had just a school-wide team when we got started, and that has morphed into having 2 teams, a freshman team and a sophomore team that include our freshman and our sophomore cluster teachers. And as I go through this presentation, I believe the question to address is, how do you communicate with parents to keep students in school, and what's working? And we'll see what you say, and I hope to get some of your ideas as well. We're always looking for ideas here. So we do have some parent communication at the beginning of the year. Our first communication comes from our freshman cluster teachers in a letter that they send out, and that letter includes to parents the expectations for both for the students in school, but also information on credits that are needed for them to become sophomores the following year, and other expectations about attendance and behavior that we know from research all impact on a student's ability to graduate on time. After that, we have newsletters and other communications that come out from the principal of the school, and we're lucky enough here to have a parent coordinator who directly serves as a liaison with parents, and he also sends out communications and has interactions with parents where he echoes those same expectations that are communicated to parents by the cluster teachers. One of the things we like to focus on is that to let parents know that if their students do get off track for on-time graduation, that we have resources, and to coordinate what those, or to communicate to them what those resources are. So as the year progresses, luckily our freshmen and our sophomore teachers that are in the clusters have the opportunity to meet daily, and so they're constantly monitoring their students' progress. However, at the end of each quarter, they meet to do an official EWS type meeting where they analyze all of the student data and really determine who is on and who is off track for on-time graduation. And then comes another opportunity for parent communication. So they do that through letters, through phone calls, through conferences. Sometimes the conferences are with the parent and the student, or perhaps just with the parent. Some of the strategies to get back on track are really what the communications are set to focus on, what the parent needs to do, what the student needs to do, and what the school plans to do in order to help that student who's fallen off track to get back on track. The example that you're seeing here on this slide is a letter that's been sent home to parents who have a student who has a problem with attendance. And so I've kind of highlighted here that the freshman teachers are letting the parent know what the problem is, giving that communication, in this particular instance, a concern about attendance. And then the second part I've highlighted is basically how the parents are communicating, well, here's something that you can do differently to help us with this. And we have a lot of parents who, their student's absent, and maybe it is an excused absent, but they don't send that letter in, they don't send that note in or that doctor slip in. And doing this also starts more communication with the parent so it can be two-way, so that if the parents do come in, if there's a phone call or a follow-up conference, then it helps us get to the root cause of why that problem with attendance might be taking place. Obviously, different interventions at different tiers are needed depending on what that real problem is. And so another thing we do at the beginning of the year that is a way of communicating with parents is to go on a community walk, and we actually visit the students' homes to make sure they are ready to attend school before the first day of class. So we go out a day or two before the freshman first day, and we go out in teams of teachers. We go to the homes of incoming freshmen. We bring a sign to put in their yard. We go out and canvass on foot the homes that are closest to our periphery, and then the other areas that we have a pretty large district for our school. We go out in vans or cars, or the principal will rent buses. And while we're there, we either give them a backpack with school supplies, or in some years we've chosen to leave a door hanger with the information that they will get the backpack when they get to school. Different decisions get made different years. And so in this slide, you can also see a picture of the backpacks that we give the students full of supplies. And another picture that shows a team of teachers at a student's home. And one of the things that we're able to do in this community walk is to make a communication to parents where we're letting them know what our expectations are. And in delivering the backpacks or the door hangers that tell about the backpacks and welcoming those freshmen to school, we're hoping that we communicate that we see academics and organization as important and that it's an expectation at our school. So we do a lot of efforts throughout the year, and sometimes we do get to the end of the year and we do have some students that have not earned enough credits to become sophomores in the next school year. And so we call those our ninth grade repeaters, or they get coded as an R9. At that point, it becomes really important to communicate to parents what's going on, that their student is off track, but that there are ways for that student to get back on track. Initially, we're letting them know that there are options for credit recovery over the summer, making sure that they know what forms need to be filled out, what resources are available to perhaps cover the cost of that credit recovery, and then also to let them know that we're not giving up on their student and they shouldn't give up on their student, that in the next school year we have sophomore cluster teachers that will take them in and start looking at their data and look for ways to help them set goals, plans to get back on track, perhaps more opportunities for credit recovery. And I'm excited to tell you that the young man that you see who graduated last year in this picture is with one of our counselors, Ward Ensign, and this young man did graduate on time. However, at the end of his freshman year here at Scott, he was a ninth grade repeater, and he did not have enough credits to graduate on time, but through our EWS efforts and through communicating with him, through communicating with parents, he did graduate last year on time and took advantage of the supports and interventions that we offered along the way. So, yay, Kobe. So where do we go from here? I really, as I was putting together my piece of this webinar, I had to stop and reflect. So far, I think in the last 5 years and now going into the 6th year, we've communicated with parents about dropout prevention and about our efforts, but really it's been a lot of indirect communication, and I think we need to be more purposeful. I'm really looking forward to using the parent brochure this year. I've already communicated with some of the administrators here at Scott and then district administrators as well to perhaps get that going here and in the rest of our school system and be more direct about why we're doing EWS and get the parents more involved in that way. It's definitely been a good process for me to do some learning. And with that, I will pass the torch on over back to Sarah, who plans to moderate the question and answer session. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you so much, Laurie. It's really, really cool to hear about some of your work in Toledo. And as Kim said, the door hangers are such a creative idea. The backpacks, it's just a great way to get kids into school. So the way we're going to be doing this Q&A, if you have a question, please put it in the question box, which is different than our group chat box. If you have comments about the question or the response, you can put those in the group chat. And my colleague Megan is going to be feeding the questions to our presenters in the group chat. So it looks like we've got a question for Sonika. And I should say, no stupid questions. We have the rest of this time, basically the next 15 minutes to use this as conversation to answer your questions. We've got some great experts here, so please put in your questions. So here's our question for Sonika. Is there a timetable you would recommend for distributing the brochure? And part 2 of that is, are there promising practices for its use that you have determined? That's a great question. So turning that question over to Sonika.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks for the question. So regarding the first one, is there a timetable you would recommend for distributing the brochure? I will say that this is a relatively new resource, so it's hard for me to put an explicit timetable on it. But based on kind of my experience with working with other schools and districts and researchers, I would recommend some of the timestamps that were listed in my presentation. So with at the beginning of the year, right? So there's opportunities to be proactive. So if there are materials that are being sent out to parents, this might be something to add to those materials. Alternatively, any intersection point that you might have with a parent. So this includes with report cards, during parent-teacher conferences, and then making them kind of just peripherally available. So if parents find them, then they can be responsive or build a connection directly with the school or district. So there are kind of, those places would be, again, like on the website or in main offices, places where they might find them on their own. Alternatively, other time points, there's no real bad time point, I would say, right? Intervention can happen at any point. And getting a conversation started with a parent at any time during the school year is probably going to be appreciated. But if you're going to prioritize the time, I would say at the beginning of the school year, so you can start initiating conversation and start developing rapport and a relationship with those parents. Regarding the second question, let me scroll back up to it. One second. Are there promising practices for its use that you have determined? So that one is going to be a bit hard to answer just because this is a newly developed resource, and so we really haven't received, and honestly, we've just launched it on the website, so we haven't really had a chance to hear back from others about promising practices. But I definitely encourage folks on this call that if you do hear or end up using it and do find use, please do reach out to us. We'd love to hear how it's being used and to incorporate that in kind of messaging to other folks about how this tool can be effectively used.
Great, thank you, Tanika. Looks like we've got lots of questions coming in. This next one that Megan gave is to Monty. How should schools and districts be engaging in one-way versus two-way communication? So how do you determine if you do one-way, how often do you do one-way versus two-way? So a little bit more information about those two strategies would be great.
No problem, and thank you for the question. I think with regard to engaging in one-way communication, I would say since that's most likely the easiest form because it doesn't require as much energy, that should be completed more often than not. And start as early as you can. As you mentioned, my colleagues talked about doing the community walk and handing out backpacks before school even started. That just gave me feels. It made me want to go to the school. So as much as you can, do the one-way communication often. I think the two-way communication would be a little bit more timely, only because you do have to be mindful of parent schedules. So I do see that one happening less, even though it is preferable, but only because it involves organizing your time around parent schedules. When to do it? For early warning systems, we do recommend that teams review data at certain time periods in the school year. Consider structuring a two-way parent communication around those times as well when you know you are implementing supports for your particular students. So I think that would be a very beneficial way to develop strategies to engage parents, because at that point in time when you're reviewing data, you're already looking at the student progress earlier on, at the beginning of the school year, at the start of the school year, and at the end of the school year. So those are my suggestions.
Great, thank you, Monty. We've got a couple good questions here for Laurie. Community walks and door hangers are a great idea. How did you get that started? Who leads the charge? And then Julie had a follow-up question to that. Who funded these book bags and supplies? So, Laurie, it sounds like we really love that door hanger and backpack idea. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, so really we are in the process right now. We had a principal who we just had a principal change. Our principal has just moved up to the district level. However, her name is Treva Jeffries, and she was a graduate of our high school. She taught here at Scott and then also became the principal here at Scott. And last year her daughter graduated from Scott. And so she's been in this community her entire life. And really, she has led the charge on doing the community walks and getting that entire initiative started. She's definitely a good cheerleader for reaching out to the community and making sure that we're visible in the community and that we're portraying a very good image in the community. So that would definitely be how we got started. Now, the question about the funding becomes a little tricky. When we first started the community walks, we had a school improvement grant, and that is one of the things that we used some of that money to fund. Of course, that money is no longer available, and so I have to say I don't know how we've been funding it since then. But I think we just always find a way to make it happen. But Julie, I will definitely look into finding out how we funded it for this year and pass that along to you and to the other data coordinators and EWS champions in the district.
Great. Thanks, Laurie. Cool to hear that story. So I'm going to skip down to this question for all presenters, and I know we haven't heard from Lacey, so I'm going to see if Lacey wants to respond to this one, and maybe if not, Laurie. So the question is, what kind of PD or coaching opportunities do teachers or school staff get for having difficult conversations with parents? So Lacey, I know you work nationally. Do you see any PD opportunities or trainings for school staff when they have these difficult conversations? If so, great, we want to hear about it. If not, we'd be curious, Laurie, if you do any training for your staff. So first I'll pass it to Lacey.
Yeah, so there is professional development and training for kind of having these conversations with parents, and really it's very focused on cultural competency and addressing cultural differences oftentimes. So we do see trainings that really help educators, and this is especially for educators that are working with student and family populations that are different than their own, trainings that help them go in and understand the cultures of the families they're working with, their communication styles, their perceptions about education and their own culture. And so it's really around cultural competency and helping those educators really understand that context and then how to address those needs. And so there's a number of programs out there. So whether it's about different racial or cultural differences, there's also a number of trainings around working with families of poverty. And it's really trying to place those educators into that context so they can understand the issues that the families are dealing with. Laurie, did you have any information on those?
Well, it's really an interesting question, and we haven't, since I've been here at Scott, had any training that I would say was specifically geared toward having conversations with parents, but yet on the other hand, we have participated in book studies together that definitely focus in on cultural differences. We also have a culturally diverse staff, so I think when we have conversations with each other, those kinds of topics come up. But I really would be interested in learning more about particular PD that would deal with giving the staff some really good just stepping stones and foundation on how to have those conversations. Our staff has changed a little bit over the last few years, and that's something that is now going to be on my to-do list.
Great. Thanks, Laurie. Monty here in Chicago wanted to add to that.
Yes, I just wanted to follow up and then also look at the question for how do you practice communication as a staff. Very much role-playing is good, and always seek advice. And it's okay to ask for support and help from your colleagues on how to better communicate with parents. And sometimes even communicating amongst staff is crucial as well in order to get the message out to the parents that you serve. So just make sure that it's at least an open communication and it's a safe space to have that conversation and that practice. When you're looking for examples of training, I'm not going to specifically give an example of a training institute, but what I would recommend is that whatever training that you do come across, make sure it's holistic and it will actually provide you that opportunity to practice those difficult conversations, practice how to develop communication visually, and also from a written perspective as well. So just make sure whatever training that you do find, it covers at least all those three forms of communication, so then you can be better prepared to develop a product that meets the needs of your parents.
Great. All right, we've got a question for Lacey I'm going to go back up to. And just as a reminder, we do have another 5 minutes for Q&A, so keep those questions coming. You can put them in the Q&A box at the top right of your screen, and Megan will feed them to our presenters here. So this question for Lacey, do you have any suggestions for communicating with parents whose first language is not English and or are new to the U.S. and our wonderfully complex education system?
Thanks, Megan. So yes, and I think the first thing here when thinking about working with these families is getting them to feel comfortable in communicating with educators and being at the school and engaging with teachers. So once you get to a place where these families are comfortable with that, they're going to really reach out and help address those barriers with you. But really, I think our strongest suggestion for working with these families where English may be their second language or they've not had any experience with the U.S. educational system is to find a parent leader or a parent ambassador. So someone from that parent community, someone from that same culture or neighborhood that is in tune with working with the school and the teachers, and that you can use as a leader, a parent mentor, or a parent ambassador to then go out and communicate on your behalf with those families. Because if they hear those communications coming from one of their own, someone they consider part of their own group, it's going to be really well received, they're going to be more comfortable, and that can be kind of the priming the pump to getting them to feel comfortable and understand how to work with the school when they see this strong leadership example, and that person can continue to act as a broker for you with those families. So that would be my primary suggestion.
Great. Thanks, Lacey. And thanks, Kim. I see your comment about how your Parent Center developed several PD opportunities as part of a grant. Oh, that's interesting. So for those of you on the webinars, you can think about maybe getting some grant funding for these kinds of trainings. All right, we've got some time left. Please enter any more questions you have. I'm going to give you guys 20 seconds to answer any more questions, or to put those more questions in there. If we don't get any more questions, we can wrap up. So take a few minutes to think about any questions you might have. All right, all of our questions have been answered apparently. Thanks to everyone who submitted questions. To wrap up, we have a survey that we really would love everyone to take. This survey helps us improve our events and webinars for the future, so we really appreciate it to fill out the survey. Megan just put that survey link in the chat box. We will also follow up with an email thanking you for joining us, and the survey link will be included there. Megan just told me we have one more question, so let's see what that question is before we leave.
Has any advice for reaching parents who are not as accessible?
Any advice for reaching parents who are not as accessible? So any of our presenters who would like to take on that question?
This is Laurie from Toledo, and I will say what I do sometimes. I don't know if it will help anyone, but sometimes I just have a kid ask them if they have their phone with them, and then just say, well, you know, can you call your mom right now? And a lot of times, even if parents have not provided a usable address or phone number to the school, their kids know how to get a hold of them. So just ask the student, and then they'll get their parent on the phone, and then just hand it, say, okay, my teacher has a question for you, you know, and they hand the phone over, and then you start the communication and see if you can get a good number and go from there.
Laurie, here in Chicago, all of us are saying that is so awesome. That is a wonderful strategy. You can't go wrong with that, because when a kid's communicating with their parent, they want to be accessible. So great. That's a great tool.
Thanks.
All right. Well, as I said before, please take our survey. It's in the chat box here and also will be emailed to you. Also, we encourage you to get in touch with us. We have posted our email addresses here, all the presenters and me, Sarah Rand, your moderator. please feel free to get in touch with us with any questions. And we really appreciate everyone joining us today. Thank you all so much.